Tired of buying a $40 to $50 Precon and instantly having to shove an additional $50 into it to make it playable? Buy this instead. This is going to be a $75 Tevil budget list. The goal of this is to just work straight out of the box. This is going to allow you to have a deck that functions as intended. It's got all of the necessary card advantage, all the necessary ramp, and a very solid game plan. Not only is this a solid budget list, but it's also going to give you a lot of ideas for cards you should be putting in your Tevil deck tech. So stay tuned and we're going to get right into it. Right after you click on that whatnot link in the description down below, you get a free $15. Helps out the channel. You guys get free money. Additionally, you can get 20% off all of your Tellurian library proxies whenever you use code DT4D at checkout. Before we talk about the cards in the deck, let's talk about what Tevil does. This is a 4CMC dragon in Sultai colors, and he says whenever he attacks, we get to mill 3 cards and return a land from those cards milled this way onto the battlefield. So we get solid ramp and mill, which we're going to turn into card advantage. Additionally, he says whenever a card leaves your graveyard, we get to generate a 2/2 zombie creature. This is going to be amazing. The creature also has a druid typing. I forgot it for a second, but we got there. I want to include as many cards as possible that work exactly like Tevil. What does that mean? Let's look at 6 for instance. Whenever 6 attacks, you get to mill cards and return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. So again, we're milling cards and we're taking cards that we milled out of the graveyard, putting it into our hand. This is going to trigger Tevil and allow us to get insane value, especially when the entire deck is just a bunch of cards that do this. Again, I just want to trigger him as much as possible, as often as possible, and then we're going to use cards like Insidious Roots and Kamal to gain a lot of value off of our board state, whether it be attacking for lethal or tapping them for a bunch of mana. That was a video of me deadlifting over 500 pounds a year ago today, but why am I showing you that? If you notice, I'm actually wearing the same shirt in that video as I am right now. Into the AM has been sponsoring this channel for a little bit over a year now, and they just asked me to give an honest review of the shirts, if I'm wearing them, if I'm still loving them, and what people think about them when I wear them out in public. And honestly, I'm still in love with these shirts, and I'm a big customer of this company because of how comfortable and how the shirts look. I mean, they still taper at the sleeve. I haven't lost any of the stretchiness in the sleeve. It still hugs my arms, which is something you want to do. Like, you want a shirt that's very flattering to the chest and shows off the arms that you've earned in the gym. Not only do they have cool graphics, but additionally, they're comfortable. You can get 10% off any of your Into the AM products whenever you use the code in the description down below. Thank you again, Into the AM, for sponsoring this channel, and I love your shirts. The number one thing that makes this deck run extremely smooth is the fact that we're milling cards while triggering our commander. So let's talk about them. We have Grapple with the Past, Say Its Name, Dig Up the Body, and Druidic Ritual. These are all cards that allow us to mill cards and return creatures or lands from the graveyard that were milled this way to our hand, triggering our commander and getting us value, essentially turning our mill into card advantage. Witherbloom Command, Eccentric Farmer, and Corpse Churn are very similar effects as well. Last Monarch of Ifnir is going to be super solid here. Not only does he give all of our zombie tokens afflict, that means whenever they're blocked, they deal 3 damage, so our opponents are really not going to want them. But additionally, at the beginning of your second main phase, if a player was dealt combat damage by a zombie this turn, you get to mill 3 cards, and then you may return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Again, mill and triggering our commander. Head Shredder is possibly one of the best cards in this deck because this guy not only mills whenever it attacks, but additionally, whenever one or more land cards are put into our graveyard from our library, we can just straight up put them onto the battlefield, which again will trigger our commander. 6 is also amazing here. This guy's first ability synergizes amazingly with the commander. We can mill 3 cards and then return a land card from among them into our hand. And then we can also utilize his second ability to discard that land that's now in our hand to give all of our permanent cards retrace. Pair this with Slowgurk, and you can kind of just return Slowgurk to your hand, return the lands to your hand, and you can just cast all the permanent spells from your graveyard as long as you've got the mana to do so. These 2 cards together are a match made in heaven, and whenever you add our commander into the mix, it's just going to give us an insane amount of value. Koga Shadow Archdruid, another card that turns our mill into card advantage. Not only does she mill 2 cards when we attack, but whenever we pair it with our commander, we're milling upwards to 5 cards a turn, and then she allows us to play 1 permanent spell from our graveyard each turn. This means we get to look at 5 cards, choose the best one, and straight up cast it. She's really amazing here. Deeproot Wayfinder is going to allow us to surveil on combat damage and then take a land card from our graveyard and put it directly onto the battlefield. So not only is this ramp, but additionally we're triggering our commander. Sivrus is awesome. We can sacrifice one of those zombie creature tokens and then cause each of our opponents to mill a card, and then our opponents have to choose if they're going to allow us to put that card into our hand or if it stays into our graveyard by paying 3 life or not. Now let me know in the comment section down below if this is just going to count as one trigger or if each individual opponent deciding counts as a separate trigger. I'm pretty sure it's one, but you know, there's some niche interaction I might not know. Ripples of Undeath is also perfect here. It allows us to mill 3 cards and then we can pay 1 and 3 life to take one of those cards and put it into our hand, triggering our commander and card advantage plus mill. It's perfect. Tato Farmer is also amazing here. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, we get 2 rad counters, and then we can tap them to put a land card from our graveyard that was milled this turn onto the battlefield. Remember, we're milling a ton of cards in this deck, so there's almost always going to be a target for this guy. Bramble Familiar does something pretty crazy. We're able to mill 7 cards and then put a creature, enchantment, or land from among them onto the battlefield, triggering our commander and mill. Not to mention in the early game when we don't have 7 mana to spend, this guy's just a mana dork that taps for mana. Lively Dirge, it's going to find whatever card we need, throw it into the graveyard, and then we can actually return up to 2 creature cards with total mana value 4 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. So again, we get a tutor something and we're triggering our commander. Tyvar is going to be amazing here as well. This guy's going to give all of our creatures haste whenever it comes to their mana abilities that we're going to be giving them with our insidious root effects. But additionally, we get to mill 3 cards and return a card with mana value 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield. So triggering our commander and milling. You can kind of see the goal here. Our next category is more ways to trigger our commander. It just doesn't have the mill attached to it. We have Titan's Nest and Snarling Gorehound. I wanted to talk about these 2 together because Titan's Nest is honestly one of the best ways to trigger our commander. All we have to do is exile 1 card from our graveyard and boom, we get a 2/2 zombie and a colorless mana that we have to use to cast spells. Snarling Gorehound says whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield, we get to surveil 1. This means for every single card we exile with Titan's Nest, Snarling Gorehound will be able to replace because our commander makes that 2/2 zombie. We can just rifle through our library this way, find whatever card we need, and then just go off. Undergrowth Recon is more ramp that allows us to trigger our commander. At end step, all we get to do is grab a land and instantly put it back onto the battlefield. Marin of Clan Neltoth, kind of similar, but there's experience counter shenanigan, and she allows us to return a creature from our graveyard to our hand, or if we have enough experience counters, we just get to throw that creature directly onto the battlefield, which again does trigger our commander. Altar of Baal, we can exile a creature you control, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. I like this here because we sacrifice a zombie, reanimate a creature, and then we generate another zombie. We will never run out of fodder for this. Chthonian Nightmares is another card we never run out of fodder for. It's only 2 mana, and then whenever it enters the battlefield, we get 2 energy. Then we have to pay X energy, sacrifice a creature, return Chthonian Nightmare to our hand, and then we get to return a creature card with mana value X from your graveyard, where X is the amount of energy you spent, right? So this is amazing here because now whenever we're reanimating the creature, we're getting another zombie. That gives us more fodder for Chthonian Nightmare. We can kind of just go off with this card, especially if we have a lot of ways to generate mana off of the tokens we're generating. Mudratha is amazing. We just get to cast 1 of each permanent type from our graveyard, and that's a good solid way to trigger our commander multiple times a turn. The Master Transcendent, all we get to do is tap this guy and put a creature card that was milled this turn onto the battlefield. Solid recursion triggers our commander. The Scarab God is another way we can kind of end the game and additionally trigger our commander. This guy can reanimate any creature for 4 CMC we just have to exile it, and it's going to be a 4/4 zombie. And then additionally, at the beginning of our upkeep, each opponent loses X life, and we get a scry X, where X is the number of zombies we control. And we're going to control a lot of zombies. Golem Patient Plotter kind of just seemed like a very consistent way to trigger a commander, so I threw him in the deck. It says whenever Golem Patient Plotter leaves the battlefield, the ring tempts you. And then we can pay 1 black, sacrifice a creature, and return Golem from our graveyard to our hand, activate only as a sorcery. So we can kind of just loop this guy in and out of the graveyard. We can get the ring to tempt us all the way up to the max, but honestly, we probably just want that draw and discard effect. The loot effect's the best part of the ring tempting you. And then he's just a solid way to loop a creature in and out of our graveyard consistently to trigger all of our effects, including our commander. Molt Tender just allows us to mill 1 card, or we can exile a card from our graveyard and add 1 mana of any color. Irinus allows us to attack and then return a land card from our graveyard to the battlefield. Springleaf Avenger, kind of similar. This guy allows us to return a permanent card from our graveyard to our hand whenever he just deals combat damage. He also has ninjutsu, so we can attack with all these 2/2 zombies. Whichever one doesn't get blocked, boom, they're getting hit with a 6/5 Springleaf Avenger instead. The next thing I want to do is generate value similar to our commander. So Tormod the Desecrated, Chalk Outline, and Insidious Roots are going to be very similar. Now whenever a creature or a card leaves the graveyard, depending on which one of these we have on the battlefield, we're going to generate a token. Additionally, Insidious Roots allows us to tap all of our zombie tokens for mana, and Chalk Outline is going to give us card advantage as well as a token whenever a card leaves our graveyard. I'm also pretty fond of Sidisi Brood Tyrant here. Not only does she trigger a ton in this deck because of all the mill, but additionally she self-mill herself and generates creature tokens. Chatterfang is going to double up on all those creature tokens in the form of squirrel tokens, and then we can sacrifice squirrel tokens to destroy our opponent's creatures. We're also going to throw Warren Soul Trader in this deck because now we can sacrifice the zombies to generate treasure tokens to cast broken spells, or with Chatterfang, this just becomes near infinite mana because you are having to pay 1 life for each creature you sacrifice, but you sacrifice a squirrel, you generate a treasure token, Chatterfang sees that and generates another squirrel. You can kind of see this just gets out of hand and allows you to generate treasure tokens equal to your life. Cryptolith Rites, Enduring Vitality, and Elven Chorus are more ways we can tap our creatures for mana, allowing us to just generate insane value whenever we have a massive board of creature tokens. Severa is one of my favorite cards in this deck. She allows you to just take control of the board. All you need is a sack outlet, and now we're able to sacrifice our zombies that are super easy to create and cause our opponents to sacrifice their creatures. This will, and make no mistakes, this will allow us to wipe the entire board 9 times out of 10. Ravenous Rotbelly, this guy enters the battlefield, eats 3 zombies, and causes our opponents to sacrifice 3 creatures. It's kind of like a mini board wipe, but probably will end up just hosing over our opponents. Undead Augur allows us to draw a card whenever we sacrifice a zombie. We do have to pay a life though. Demolisher Spawn and Kamal Heart of Krosa. I wanted some Craterhoof-esque effects on a budget, and these are the best that we have to offer. It's super easy to hit Delirium, and the fact that we can animate lands with Kamal is just amazing here, and 8 mana is not hard to get to in this deck. We've got ramp everywhere, including on our commander. Vault 12 is one of my favorite budget cards when it comes to zombies, because not only does this give everybody rad counters, allowing us to mill even more cards, but it allows us to generate a ton of zombies, and then the last tick, we get to put 2 1/1 counters on each creature you control that's a zombie or a mutant. So it buffs our zombies up and generates zombies. What more could you want? Pitiless Plunderer is also going to make an appearance in the deck. Also insane with Chatterfang. All you need is a sack outlet, and now you sacrifice a squirrel, generate a treasure token, and that gives you another squirrel. Kind of the same thing, but now you don't have to pay life, and sometimes it takes 3 cards instead of just 2, but once you get there, you get infinite treasure tokens and infinite squirrel die triggers. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure as long as you do have 2 squirrel tokens, you can just sacrifice both the squirrels, generate 2 treasure tokens, and then you can even use Chatterfang as the sack outlet and destroy everybody's creatures in the process. Profaner of the Dead is also pretty underrated here. We're generating a ton of 2/2s here, so just being able to sacrifice a 2/2 zombie and return the majority of creatures to their owner's hand is pretty powerful. So I kind of like this card here as a pseudo board wipe. The Wise Mothman is just going to put a ton of counters on our creatures and be a form of consistent mill, so he's definitely going to get a slot in here as well. Wonder always finds itself into the graveyard, and then all of these creature tokens that are zombies are flying now, and that's also pretty busted. Shout out to my patrons, Irrelevant, Chicken Salad, The Professional Heal, Preator, and Excessum. You guys rock. I hope this helped you guys in your deck building endeavors, and I will see you in the next one.